Morning, guys. Well, we're just a couple of days away from Thanksgiving. I just thought I'd show you basically what I'm wasting my time on right now. And wasting it is the operative word. I bought me a DC power supply because I have two early DC electric motors. And these things only run on about 3 to 4 volts or less DC. Got to be DC. Well, I had a DC rectifier that I hooked up to my Z transformer, and I hooked it up to these motors because I figured if you just crack the throttle, just enough like you crack it to where the locomotive, the light comes on and it just maybe semi-buzzes, that would be low enough to run these motors. Ooh, not so. When I cracked that throttle, these motors just about blew up. They they wound up. They sounded like jet engines running, which is not a good thing. So I bought the DC power source, $49, $50 shipping and everything through Amazon, and it is exactly what I need. So what we're going to do is the red one. It's an H&K. I can't pronounce their name. But it dates from around 1909, somewhere in there. And it's not a self-starter, so you give it power and you've got to give it a little nudge and it starts to run. And what it's got is two electromagnets on either side, and they pull these protrusions here. They just keep pulling it down, and it speeds up. You've got a on-off switch, which is nothing more than it's just a rocking lever with copper strips on it, a commutator. That's all it amounts to. So we're going to turn on just a little bit of power, and I think about 1.5 volts. Let's go right there and see if I can give it a nudge. Yeah, it's running on 1.5 volts, but we're going to give it a little bit more. This thing is really neat. It's got bearings. I don't know if you can see it. I've got that bearing on both sides, and it's got, as you can see, a slot for a screwdriver. Well, these have got like little divots in the end of it, and you screw it in or screw it out to apply the tension on the shaft, and that just keeps the motor from wobbling all over the place. That's all it is. It's an extremely simple setup, and it's so quiet. It's got a pulley on it. I have not put this on any stationary toys yet, and that's what I like about this. I can slow it down because that's really spinning quite fast. So we'll turn this one off, and good way to lose your finger. We'll see about... I wish I had 4 hands, is what I wish. Or a 28-year-old assistant with really long legs. That would be beneficiary too, in so many ways. All right, there we go. We got it hooked up. Now watch this. I think about 0.5 volt will have this thing humming. Let's see what happens. Nope, we're a little bit more than 0.5 volt. It's hard to see this one. It's hard to see this one moving, but it is running. I don't know, can we see the front? Yeah, you can see it. Now, I ran this on stationary toys. There you go. 0.8 volts. It don't take much electricity to run these things, and they're absolutely super cool from a time where electricity was considered magical. So there we go. We just turn her off, and that's it. All right. The other thing we're working on, well, first of all, before I talk about that, let's talk about what you kind of need in your shop. You can never have too much axle rod. And what I've got here is cold rolled, water cooled steel, and I use them for axles. Going from right to left is 3/16. Lionel used a 3/16 axle in a lot of their post-war stuff. In the middle is your standard gauge axle, which is 0.180. And I, for the life of me, can't understand why Lionel just didn't go with the 0.187, the 3/16 axle. I mean, 0.180, that's an odd, to me, it's an odd number. And at the very end is a 5/32, and 5/32 is used on some of their smaller cars, like for instance, the 68 inspection car. And the 68 inspection car, I'm kit bashing sooner or later to either standard gauge or 1-gauge template. Now, I've already stretched the wheels on the front trucks on the inspection car, and it is set up perfectly for 1-gauge. Also, these axles are long enough, and I've already set it up for standard gauge. If I put a wheel puller on this and pull the wheel about a quarter of the way off of the axle on both sides, it matches up perfectly to standard gauge. And there's enough axle that it doesn't wobble. Now this is 5/32, so I can cut this out. I can pull these off, and I can fabricate an axle for it. And what I'll do is, to keep the slop in here, this is a 5/32 axle collar. I'll slide that on, and then I can put one on each side, and then I can set the gauge up, and it gives me a little bit of slop in there. This is what I use on almost everything I do when I'm making axles. So that's the other thing. And the backside, let me show you. The backside of this, as you can see, there's a hell of a lot of axle there. Well, the reason there's axle is because it had fake wheels on it, fake rubber tires. And those axles are long enough, as I said, to pull the wheel all the way to the very end, and I can have it set up for 1-gauge or standard gauge. Now, what I'll have to do is I'll probably have to pull the wheels on this on both sides, slide axle collars on it, and because without a stop, that gear is going to slop back and forth, and it will disengage the worm gear. Or I can even make a new axle. I mean, it's not that difficult. You slide it off that spline. You cut yourself a 5/32 axle to the proper length, and you put a spline in the center there, and you drive it back on and line it up. So it should be doable. But these are things for 2024. I haven't got time to do it this year. I've got a friend who's having a knee replaced here in just a couple of weeks, so I'm going to be taking care of them for the foreseeable future, and I'll be somewhere in a galaxy far, far away from here, unfortunately, at least as far as it comes to the trains. I like to screw around with this stuff in the morning. The other thing that I'm working on, finally, if I can find it, oh, here it is. This is the trailing truck for my Jad Lines Hiawatha, and there she is right there. This trailing truck is absolutely, the way they had it set up is absolutely worthless. It's got rivets that hold the side plate on. Not rivets, but they're pegs that they pinged over. Well, the one pulled loose, so I re-pinged it. And if they don't stay, I'm going to do like what they did initially for the front. drill it through and use the sheet metal screw to hold it. I've already fabricated a wheel for it, and I'm going to use this, and I'm not going to mount the wheel solid to the axle. I'm going to sit it in there, and I'm going to put axle collars on the back side. I don't care if the axle turns. I want these wheels to roll smoothly. Like I say, this is a jerry-rigged job, even from the factory. They drilled 2 holes in it for the doggone axle to fit into. So when you get it in that hole, it's a little bit on the tight side, and I want that wheel to be able to slide a little bit back and forth, left and right on the axle, and I sure as heck want it to spin. So that's what I'm up to, guys. There's the jolly old elf watching over things. You guys have a good weekend, a good, safe holiday, and we'll talk with you later, most likely next year. Later. Toodaloo.